So I'm just gonna go ahead and lead with the most scandalous one. Ooh, scandalous. Wow. Where did that come from? The most scandalous item that I know nothing about, but it's been in the news cycle recently, and I'm like, well, what the hell is going on here? But there's not an anime. Well, it was gonna be an anime, but no, it never got an anime, did it? No, it didn't. Act Age. It's a manga. Apparently, it was very popular. It was gonna get a stage play. Matsuki, the mangaka, he fucked up big time to the point where homie is arrested and most likely going to jail. And I don't know much about the show, but all I know is that homeboy basically was riding around on a bike molesting middle school girls and got caught. And then when asked by the police what he was doing, he was like, everything you said, there's generally nothing incorrect. So it's kind of like, bruh. So what's happening now is the manga is ending abruptly. I think when you guys hear this episode, it's gonna be the last chapter you're ever gonna get of this motherfucker. And the stage play got canceled immediately. And it's just weird. It's just weird. And it's also kind of sad to see like something that was like gaining traction and popularity just like come falling down, because then you think about all the people who were involved with it, like the editors, the publishers, the actors who had already made contracts and booked and missed out on other opportunities, the seiyus who were probably in discussions for like being part of the anime cast, like all that shit's falling apart. People losing their jobs because someone wanted to grope middle school girls.
Yikes.
So yeah, and then along the same, not along the same lines, but the other bigger piece of news that I've noticed this week is AT&T is really trying to hustle Crunchyroll out here to other people. They did an asking price of 1.5 billion, which holy shit, okay, to Sony, and Sony declined that shit, and then they dropped it down to 1 billion, and now they're shopping it around to other places. This kind of came as a surprise to me because I've seen Crunchyroll like doing the damn thing. They got 3 million subscribers. They have the Crunchyroll Expo. They're always at these anime cons with all the fucking gear. They're doing limited merchandise with Megan Thee Stallion. They're stepping up their social media game and engagement. Like, it's really fucking, they're like on their shit, and it's just like, but AT&T owns them and they're not on their shit. They're apparently in a shit ton of debt. And so it's kind of just like, damn, is this gonna really fuck up like the come up for Crunchyroll? Because I would hope it wouldn't, but
Yeah, my assumption is it probably would not. I forget what Crunchyroll sold for in its sort of first round. But the valuation from AT&T, which may have been a little high for Sony, is not really that much higher than what it'll probably sell for in the end. I noted that in the stories, at least that I saw around it, that outside analysts said that Crunchyroll could probably value its subscribers at around $300 to $400 per subscriber, and given that they've been able to increase that count, the paid side anyway, year over, to 3 million, means that they've got a pretty solid operating revenue, and it's not something that's shrinking. And if anything, over the last year, they've added to their value by producing more and more original content that they own, at least partial rights or distribution rights to. So that gives it a library that goes outside of its licensing. I know that's like the boring money talk, but from a service point of view, it's extremely valuable. So I'm less concerned about the future of the platform. Mostly this is just, it seems like this is driven by AT&T being under tremendous pressure to bring down its own debt. And it's not as if the partnerships that Crunchyroll has right now with other media companies like HBO or anything else are in any danger of being altered or dropped just because they get a new owner. Unless it's someone like NBC Universal, who would probably want to fold a lot of their content into their upcoming web platform. But I doubt that that's going to happen because NBC, I think, is also struggling with some debt, and they're launching Peacock and all this other stuff. So I think it's actually more of like a seller's market, and Crunchyroll will be fine.
Okay. What else do I have? Oh, so I got some words for Netflix because this news is annoying, and it's not official news, but basically the rumor mill has started to spin about the Avatar live action adaptation that we are supposed to be excited about because they brought the actual creators back to have full creative discretion or oversight. And they left the show this past week. And for a little while, it was kind of just like, why'd they leave the show? And people were joking about it. But then slowly and surely, one after another, people were basically like, I've heard reports. And no one's spoken on it explicitly. Like, the creators themselves didn't say, we left because of it. They were just like, we're no longer a part of that. So whatever they release, it does not represent us. And it's kind of just like, well, damn. But Netflix basically wanted a majority white cast. I've also heard they wanted to add another character to the core Avatar group, and then they wanted to age everyone up because they wanted to add on more mature themes, including sex.
Oh, but why?
So
why?
I just want to say this is so unnecessary. All you have to do is follow the plot that you were already given and just do it in live action. Why are you fiddling with this shit? Also, Netflix is fucking notorious for whitewashing shit on the regular. And if you're not whitewashing it, you're giving us a trailer with a dark-skinned black character and then you're premiering it with a light-skinned or fair-skinned person. You do it all the time. You did it with the little black boy show. We get it, okay? We get it. It's just another form of the bullshit that's going on. But the thing that gets me is that we've been through this before. The first M. Night Shyamalan's movie needs to disappear. He needs to go to jail, to be honest, for that first Avatar movie. He needs to go to jail. But if that's not a lesson in literally angering an entire fan base to the point where they actively shit on a movie every day, like you can find the original movie, you can find hate for that original movie every fucking day. That's how bad it is. Why would you start to go down the same path?
I have a lot of feelings about this.
Do they think that, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it better. And our way is going to be better because our way of whitewashing is better. No. I know. The entire purpose of the show is because it is set in that particular culture. There's a specific culture they are pulling these characters from. And they're honoring that shit. And they want to hire people who represent those cultures. And by you wanting to push popular white actors onto people, it's just bullshit. And you can guaranteed, I'm pretty sure it's still going to be popular because people are going to hate watch it and they're going to shit on it and then they're going to mean the shit out of it. And Netflix is going to get their life because they're still going to make money from it.
Yeah. I mean,
and it just fucking sucks for the creators because I want those two creators to make something else. Like the Dragon Prince. The Dragon Prince is great. I like it. It gets better every single season and they've already approved it for all 7 books or 8 books or whatever. That's great. They left them alone, but you also have your white lead, and there's a colorful cast of people from different cultures. Gay culture is seamlessly integrated throughout the whole thing, and you get your action and you get your fantasy. It's great. Why can't you just let them do the same thing with this? What's the problem? What's not clicking?
I mean, I have a very complicated relationship personally with Avatar. I love it as a series. Is
it Korra?
We don't have to get into specifically because I want to focus a little bit more on this live action effort by Netflix. But I will say that as a series, it does so many good things, creatively, artistically. Whether or not you agree with some of those things, I'm open to interpretation. I'm not a big fan of Legend of Korra, but that's fine. I wouldn't necessarily say it's objectively a terrible show, but it didn't work for me in a variety of ways, and maybe we'll explore that at another time. But the key, I think, for Netflix is that you have to ask at a very high level why you're bringing this project to life in the first place. Hypothetically, because it's a valuable IP. And an IP is valuable when it's got a lot of fans who are willing to pay money, put their eyeballs on something, put their time into something. That's where its value comes from. So there are many ways that as a media production company, as a live streaming service, you can take advantage of that. I have no idea what Netflix's metrics were saying. I don't know if they had some idea going in as to what that show had to be in order for them to make the profit they were interested in with it. I know, and we brought up a little bit, that there have been other adaptations that have been done under the Netflix umbrella of previously original source material that was not well received. I mean, we could talk about the Death Note movie. We can talk about various comic adaptations that didn't quite work out for a variety of reasons. And we can also talk about the ones that have been successful. So like Umbrella Academy was big in season 1 is now big again in season 2. Sabrina, even though they wound up canceling it, which I am assuming is just general interest, was actually a pretty good show. And then they had is it Sunnydale or something like that? Or
I'm not a big Netflix watcher, to be honest.
Whatever. But the point is that from just from a production point of view, you bring in the Avatar IP and you bring in the original creators, presumably because you want to recapture whatever the main audience is, air quotes, hungry for. And that's more Avatar stuff that feels like and looks like and sounds like the Avatar stuff they like. Now, I understand that it's possible that you could look at all that and say, well, maybe we want to do something different. Maybe we want to take an approach like we took with the Twisted Tales of Sabrina and make it darker, make it more adult, make it distinct from what people remember Avatar being in order to put our own stamp on it, because maybe Netflix itself is just trying to brand itself in a specific way with this live action content. I am okay with that as a starting point. Right? Like, that's fine if you want to try that. The question becomes, if you can't get the original creators to go on board with that vision, maybe at that point you start to question whether that vision makes sense for this particular intellectual property. Because I would argue that a show like Avatar, which is not necessarily marketed for children and doesn't necessarily have a fan base of very young people, I would say most people who are into Avatar now are in their 20s and 30s. On paper,
the original ones,
right? On paper, they might look like, they would want something like what the reported vision for the new series is going to be on paper. But in reality, those people are very married to the characters and the moments and the ideas and the presentation from the original show, and they already got burned on a live action adaptation by that was much more well funded and better promoted, and most likely had higher hopes attached to it than this one. So you're not really in a position as a company to come in and say, well, we want to try something new, because there's a lot of goodwill that has to be earned back from that fan base to get them on board, to make sure that Netflix gets that max value out of what you're paying to get everything together for this IP. So I say all that to mean that it sounds like this was a half-baked idea from the beginning. And it's very, very unfortunate that different sets of executives have taken a look at the Avatar franchise now twice in live action and have basically come to the exact same conclusion that's wrong, that pisses everybody off, which is astounding to me, because the level to which the Avatar movie got dragged all over the place and was just a commercial flop should have been a warning sign that if they want to do something like that, again, they're going to have to earn their way into it, not just buy off the creators. So,
and it doesn't make any sense that there's all this social media hate and clarification for what people want and what people don't want. and they still are going the other way. It's mind-boggling.
It's a kind of arrogance, actually, and
you
that's
know
the
what? That is a
infuriating
great,
part of it.
yeah. Because they're the ones with the money. They're the ones that can do it.
And again, I'm not even saying that it can't be done at all. I can totally see a reimagined version of the Avatar world in live action with older actors, with a slightly less diverse cast, and maybe a storyline that's focused on a particular area. Right? I can see all these things, and I can even see adding adult themes. But
I could see that if it were added with like a side story.
Right. And but my big but is you have to carry your audience into that experience. There's no way around it. This is not an original work. This is an existing intellectual property with a very large, very vocal, and very dedicated fan base. You have to, as a producer, you got to bring them into this new vision that you've got. And it's when you lose the original creators, you're not just losing some noisy, annoying people who are telling you all the things you can't do. You're losing a lot of goodwill from the fans, because the only reason people would even give this concept a chance is if it had the rubber stamp from people who were not involved in the movie, who that they still have some credibility left. You lose them, there's not really a lot of upside for anyone who's into Avatar to follow along with this. And a casual audience is going to look at this and be like, this is a show based on a kid's cartoon. Everybody's white. They're all having sex. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Yes. So yeah, I definitely had to bring that up, because I was just like, I don't understand why you're doing this. This just, it's like you want the outrage almost.
Yeah, that's not a good idea. I'm assuming that this was a legitimate like creative dispute, and they just didn't handle it very well on the PR side.
Oh no, they failed.
Yeah, but if they're trolling their audience, then they don't deserve a single viewer.
No, it's just very interesting, because I've seen like a few like accounts on Twitter talk about like their experiences with Netflix and how like it's not the most accepting work environment, even though they present themselves to be like, forward thinking, strong back leads and all that kind of stuff like that. But it's like, but when you still see the content that they put out, it's kind of just like, well, you're still not really following through. Like, you're talking the talk, but the walk is like, you do 2 steps forward and then you jump back 5 steps.
Yeah, I mean, I have theories about this, and they're based on some of the reading that I've done around Netflix, at least as a producer. And I think what a lot of people don't remember, even though it's obvious when you mention it, is that Netflix is an incredibly data-driven organization. All of their media acquisitions, all of their original content spending is based on what people are watching, what categories, and essentially the metadata associated with every show that ever gets streamed or not streamed on that platform. And that's how they decide all sorts of things. For example, it's how they decide budgets. It's how they decide offers to either individual creators or for licensed material. It's also how they put walls around the creative expression on a lot of their own native titles. Because what will happen is they'll say, okay, we're paying X amount of dollars for a show that is going to target people who like to watch horror and fantasy. They're between the ages of 16 and 35, and they've got the following interests, and they just list them down because that's their thing. So if you are a creator and they've greenlit you for a show that goes into that slot with that budget, as long as you're inside of those rails, you're going to have an amazing experience where you'll feel like you can do anything. But if you're someone who may want to go off the beaten path, or your production goes off in such a way that you want to do that, all of a sudden you hit a lot of very, very hard walls where they will tell you, no, we are not paying for this thing or that thing. These are the ideas that we want here because we are targeting this audience very specifically. And I've heard this story from, folks who I know who are involved in some Netflix-related either production or development. I've read this in articles that this is a problem. It's something that came up even when Netflix was buying up comedy specials. I mean, everyone's familiar with Monique, but there were a lot of
Oh my
other
God, the Monique
comedians
situation.
who
Yeah.
did, in fact, get the bag from Netflix. But part of the reason they got what they got was because Netflix has a very specific way of valuing its minutes of content. So I can imagine a situation where they looked at Avatar and said, "Ooh, we can get this IP for X amount of dollars, but the show has to be something that is like, I don't know, people who watched Kingdom or people who watched some of the other things that are already on there, and that fixed their budget. That also fixed the creative vision. And so when the original producers and writers got in there and said, okay, well, we want to make a story about the original story, so let's get the kids in, let's get everything else. And the Netflix bosses said, no, this is what we paid for, a dark reimagining that's aged up, and et cetera, and that didn't work for them. But like that process is something that is hidden from most people, and it's not necessarily something that gets a lot of daylight even in media, because most people are like either marveling over how much money Netflix is spending on stuff, or when they have a hit, like, the creators will all be wheeled out there like, oh, we can do whatever we wanted, it's a great environment, and it probably is, so long as you're doing what Netflix is telling you to do.
Fuck them, man. It's not supposed this isn't what's supposed to happen, but okay. What else do you have?
The note I have for this week comes from an article that was published in It Media about a week or two ago, from a anime analyst in Japan named Tadashi Sudo. He was talking about the idea that Japanese animation in Japan may be suffering from something called Galapagos syndrome. Galapagos syndrome is just like a broad term that covers like any kind of product or idea that's created and built up in an isolated way, sort of away from either like foreign influences or a global market. And the result is something that might be very marketable inside of that culture or that country, but is very difficult to export because it's just so foreign and different from what a foreigner might expect. Besides anime, one of the more interesting stories that sort of is in the same vein is around Japanese wireless like handsets and phones going from like the late 90s to the mid 2000s. I know that when I was growing up, I'd always hear these stories about how, oh, Japan is like 20 years in the future, because while we were messing around with like flip phones and razors, they already had video chat and immersive web applications and everything else. The problem is that you couldn't bring over a Japanese phone because they literally didn't even run on the same kind of network technology that existed in the United States. So if you saw like a cool Docomoco phone, it was only ever going to work in Japan, and all the features that made it interesting were things that were developed in a silo. And while they were ahead of their time, 10, 15 years ago, they were very quickly then surpassed once foreign countries did their own thing and made it work in a way that appealed to global audiences. So, we were all wowed by the iPhone, and eventually every phone became some version of an iPhone. But for a while, if you compared an iPhone to what they had in Japan, the iPhone was trash. And in fact, if you tried to bring an iPhone into Japan, you had a hell of a time getting the thing to work, because the cell networks ran it's a longer story. Like the cell companies over there, they all had their own unique data infrastructure, so you couldn't even bring phones between companies. Like, it was crazy. But
oh my God.
But this particular author was talking about Japanese anime as an industry, and one of the things that he noted is that anime broadly has been in a boom worldwide for at least the last 10 or 12 years.
Absolutely.
We just talked about Crunchyroll being valued at $1 billion. At the same time, Funimation had to shut down a big part of their web streaming service a couple of years ago. They still have a platform, but it's nowhere near as robust as it once was. You hear constantly every year stories about studios being very successful, having projects that are massively popular and generate tons of money, and then they are on the brink of collapse because they had no cut of the actual proceeds from merch and broadcast and everything else. You go down another level and you look at some of the helper studios, the ones that do like in between work or just clean up, and a big part of the ecosystem of actually making anime. I mean, in those studios, life is hell for the people who work there. The wages are really low. I remember a year or two ago that project that folks were promoting a lot about. I think it was actually through Crunchyroll. It was last year, that like anime dorm project where they were literally soliciting money from people to like help pay the living expenses of animators and production staff because life was just so hard and they weren't making any money. I mean, that's crazy.
Jesus,
at the same time that globally as an art form, it's exploding. And so part of this was this article was wondering aloud and also looking at some data to figure out what is going on outside of Japan with anime as a industry. So other countries producing original content that either borrows from anime themes or is almost indistinguishable, to errors and controversies surrounding exported anime that hit cultural sensitivities or other things that limited the ultimate appeal or success of the show. So they brought up the original JoJo OVA, where there was a scene where Dio was just reading from a Quran, and the association of like a vampiric villain, studying those texts while we were in the midst of a war on terror, just generated a lot of heat for the publisher. I think it was Shueisha. There's other times when like just depictions of characters or depictions of places that are added as an attempt to diversify the series that they're involved in, or to add a new flavor. Unfortunately, those depictions may also suffer from just a lack of cultural sensitivity or even understanding, and that's because a lot of the people involved are all Japanese, and they bring with them, either their level of education or their level of sensitivity, and a lot of it could have just been avoided by having more foreign staff, more foreign partners as a component of the design and development of anime. And his sort of final point was that doing this and integrating more of this global talent that's grown up in the last 10 years not only will protect the industry from making mistakes, but it'll also chip away at some of the big financial problems that a lot of these studios have by just sticking with a Japanese model. And so I felt like this article and Tadashi-san's thoughts were well needed, and something that you don't generally get a good taste of, even though this is a conversation that's happening in the industry. So as much as I loathe to support mega corporations that are valued in the billions, what Crunchyroll is doing this year with their original projects and their commitment, and Netflix's commitment, though we'll see what turns out, to put a cut of these proceeds directly back in the hands of the production companies themselves, is most likely critical for the anime that I love, and I know many other people love, to survive in the way that it deserves to. So I thought it was quite a good article.
Fate Grand Order, the Camelot stuff is getting an anime. They showed the first visual. I don't think we have a trailer yet, but anything about Fate Grand Order, it's a monster. It's a fucking monster now. It started off very bad, but this is one of the instances where when you listen to your fan base, shit turns out well for you. When Fate Grand Order first came out and they started releasing the chapters and shit like that, the fan base was like, "Oh, bitch, no, this is Fate. How dare you? This is subpar. We don't want this. We don't like this." And they stepped their game up, and now like it has the movies. They just got done with Babylonia Demonic Warfront. Like, it's fucking amazing, and they just rolling in money now because the gacha game is bringing them money. So I'd recommend that. Also, Noblesse and Jujutsu Kaisen, we got trailers for those two. Crunchyroll Productions. Jujutsu Kaisen, I know nothing about it. Noblesse, I know nothing about it. I'm gonna remain that way until I watch it, cause I know Jujutsu Kaisen is really, really popular, but I'm gonna wait. I mean, it's like a month away. I can do that. And then, as I said last week, Maid Dragon is definitely getting a second season. Very excited about that. It was well deserved. It's fucking about time. But the fire and then the director dying, it's just There was a whole bunch of stuff up against that show, and it's just really nice to know that it's going to continue. And then also Zoids Wild is going to Netflix. Wow, I'm talking so much about Netflix today. Zoids Wild, I actually was very interested in it because I fucked with Zoids when I was younger. When that shit was on the original Toonami, I fucked heavily with Zoids. I enjoyed the shit out of that. And now I'm kind of just like, eh. And most likely it's because it's not marketed to me anymore. Like when I was younger, definitely I was like, oh yeah, I get the shit. But now I'm really not seeing that much buzz about it outside of Japan as far as like it being the second coming or like, oh, this is so much better, etc., etc. It's just the Zoids, they look cool. And, you know, maybe one day I'll be bored and I'll be on Netflix and I'll be like, you know what, I'm going to give this shit a chance. But it's nice that it's going to Netflix, so that's definitely going to put the spotlight on it a little bit more. And that's about all. That's all I have for news.
Word. I actually thought we had a dead news week. We actually had a lot.
Yeah, there was a lot.